It's Hoffman Show on a Thursday. I'm really confused as to what day it is because typically we have a meeting with our boss on some Wednesdays, and we had it today instead, and thus I'm confused because it's actually Thursday. Tomorrow's Friday. We're going to be live. I'm sure Russell was talking about this all day. We're going to be live at Army-Navy's Radio Row because the Army-Navy game is this weekend here in D.C. Very, very cool to host that spectacular sporting event in the nation's capital. We have a bunch of good guests lined up for tomorrow, including Jacob Hester, who went to LSU and is a big college football guy, but he has those LSU ties. So, one, he probably keeps up with the Saints, but also obviously has been watching Jaden Daniels for a long time, so excited to talk to him about that. A couple others that are not 100% confirmed yet, but should have some good guests tomorrow on site over at Radio Row. As for today on the show, we will get to Bill Belichick's hiring at University of North Carolina coming up in about 10 minutes. But I want to start just doing a little bit more on KJ Osborne and the wide receiver room with where we're at with the Commanders, because I've taken some time to actually watch a lot of KJ Osborne, relatively speaking. I've probably at this point watched like 60 or 70 snaps of him over the last couple of years, which is, you know, he's played probably close to 1,000. So, like, we're talking a small sample size, but definitely enough to get a feel for who he is as a receiver, how he's used in multiple offenses. Some of this year where he was not very productive in New England, and maybe a little bit of why. But then also I pulled up 2022 in Minnesota and was watching some of that about an hour ago before the show. And I feel like I have a pretty good feel for who KJ Osborne is. We'll also let you hear from Cliff Kingsbury in just a few minutes on KJ Osborne and the wide receiver room in general, where it is with Osborne coming in, claimed off waivers from the Patriots, and Noah Brown exiting with that interior or internal injury, which I heard John Keim say on his show, on his podcast, that it was something to do with Noah's kidney. Is the most information that I've heard on that. So Osborne is a guy who has good feet, and that is both as a blocker and as a route runner. As a blocker, the way it shows up is he has a good base. It's underneath him, and he's effective as a blocker. And they actually used him in both Minnesota and New England quite a bit as, I don't want to say a tight end, but like he would line up in a tight end split, a super tight split to the line, and like be a part of the blocking surface at the point of attack. And whether that was, you know, kind of pinning a defensive end at times, whether that's trying to get up on a linebacker, or most often just digging out a safety, but being in an advantageous spot to do it and doing like a really good job of it. The biggest reason why I think they signed KJ Osborne is because he plays really hard and he blocks his face off. And so we can get into who he is as a route runner and what he does and doesn't have in a second. But I watched, even when watching him in New England, I just hit play on the tape. I was like, let's pull up every snap that he's been on the field this year. And thanks to NFL Pro, I can do that. So pull it up, KJ Osborne, on field, play. And so I'm watching the Cincinnati game, week 1. And he kind of, I don't want to say jumps off the tape because I'm watching him. So obviously, like, I'm paying attention to him. But the first thing that jumps off the tape when you focus on him is like he goes hard every single snap in a way that is reminiscent of being a Commander. Now, he doesn't have tremendous physical tools, which I think show up in the passing game. But at a minimum, you're getting maximum effort every play. And that's kind of a non-starter for Dan Quinn and company and for Adam Peters. And so the fact that they had this guy on their radar, and there's been rumors coming out of New England for a while. I wouldn't be surprised to hear eventually at some point that they poked around at him at the trade deadline because I think some other teams did, and ultimately New England probably wanted too much. But he's wanted out because he's fallen out of favor up there, and he's not the only one. There are a bunch of wide receivers have fallen out of favor up there. Tyquan Thornton, same thing. They released him. So there's been some guys that have been productive receivers in the NFL that just for whatever reason in this current New England regime, as they kickstart things in their post-Belichick era, receivers, yikes. So for Osborne, the blocking, and specifically the blocking at the point of attack, I think is a huge, huge draw and a big piece of replacing Noah Brown in terms of the puzzle, because he was a guy that you could run behind they were using him in the most recent game on a lot of insert runs. And that is where he is coming through the line of scrimmage as like a lead blocker type. But also some of those same blocking assignments that he had been doing, like the runs are actually similar. They're just coming from a different, like his assignment is coming from a different spot. So he'd be responsible for blocking the safety, but instead of doing it and having to come from outside in as a receiver lined up in either a tight split or in the slot, now he's coming across the formation, getting a head start, and coming at that safety from the inside out. And that was a really good tweak that Cliff put on the running game against Tennessee. They had some big explosive runs off of it, including, if I'm remembering correctly, I know Noah had a big block on the 40-yard touchdown run by Brian Robinson. I don't think it was an insert, but he definitely was one of the guys who made that go from a 10-yard gain to a 40-yard gain and have B-Rob untouched on his first carry into the end zone. The other element, obviously, of his game is what does he do as a receiver? Here's where he's interesting. In Minnesota, specifically in 2022, he was the number 3 guy to Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. And I think that is his ideal role as a pass catcher. He reliably will get where he needs to go and turn around and, put the ball on him. He'll catch it. And when you are the 3rd guy behind Jefferson, who's running every route in the book, Thielen, who at the time was running some deeper stuff, or at least pulling coverage away, you'd have these big pockets of space. And Osborne is sudden enough as an athlete to get there, turn around, stop on a dime, catch a football. And he's not super dynamic after the catch. He's not a huge vertical threat. He's not a super quick, twitchy guy. But he's got good feet, so he can stop quickly. His brakes are good. And he'll get in those spaces. I think when it comes to replacing Noah Brown, the vertical element of their game is going to rely on De'Ami Brown. When it comes to some of the bigger body type of stuff that they ask him to do, some of the outs, some of the curls, the hitches, I kind of think that's Luke McCaffrey time. And it's a little bit of a sink or swim for a guy who was a Friday pick just last April. Osborne can do some of that. He's a little hit or miss on some of those because it's not like he's 5'11", so he doesn't have huge size. He doesn't have a massive wingspan. He's 200 pounds. So he's stocky and he's built, but he's just not big. And so trying to get him to run some of the big-bodied receiver routes that a guy like Noah did is, I think, a mistake. But Cliff has been very good this year, as has Tavita and Brian Johnson and everyone else who's involved in these processes of making sure that guys are in the right spots. And the good part about Osborne is if you now need Luke to go outside a little bit more, or you need De'Ami outside a little bit more, Osborne can play multiple spots. So in Minnesota, in New England, both, he lined up all over the field. He can line up outside. He can line up inside. He can line up, like I said, tight to the formation and be an impact player in the running game. And then, obviously, if you want to, he gets a lot of his catches on play action, these little boot actions where, hey, I'm part of the blocking surface. I block down. Now I leak into the flat. I'm wide open. And then can he turn upfield and be super dynamic in the open field? I didn't see that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist somewhere in the tape, but in the, let's call it 70 snaps that I've watched over the last 24 hours, really the last, I don't know, since 7 a.m. this morning when I woke up and decided that's what I wanted to do with my morning, I haven't really seen that. Cliff Kingsbury was asked today on KJ Osborne and, what he's going to bring to this offense. Here's what the Commanders' offensive coordinator had to say.
Yeah, I've liked him. Eval'd him when I was in Arizona and liked what I saw. I've heard tremendous things about the type of person he is. So he's a guy who can play inside, outside, and give you a lot. And so we got to see kind of how he fits in with us and try to get him up to speed. But from what I've seen on tape, he's definitely a guy that we can use. I
think he's like a lot of other wide receivers in their room. He has a very particular set of skills, and they've been good at knowing how to use that. How quickly can they get KJ Osborne on the field?
Yeah, we'll try and do as much as we can with him this week and see if he'll be game ready. And then if not, we'll cram all through, the road trip and get him as much information as he can and try to get him going. But from all accounts, everybody we've talked to, he's very conscientious understands football, great with X's and O's. So usually about a week, and they're ready to have some sort of role. And we want to make sure when he goes in, he's confident and understands he can play fast. So we won't overload it, but he'll definitely have a role soon.
I wonder if that could be as soon as this weekend. It definitely could be another week, but I think some of that's going to depend on what they need to do on the rest of the roster because, like, he's on the roster. It's not like he's on IR. It's not like he's on practice squad. Like, he's on the 53. Just do you make him active or not? And that could depend on what you do at other places. Ultimately, Cliff's got to replace the production from not just Noah Brown, but Austin Eckler. And so how does Cliff think about that, and where does Osborne fit in all of that?
Yeah, I that's the kind of $1 million question. You got to see where does that come from, that extra offense. Do we need to have different sets and run the ball more, or can we take more shots now? Is that something that's going to help us, get those yards back and maximize the guys who will be playing? And that's what we got to figure out over this next couple game stretch is where does that come from? But it's hard to replace two guys like that, the protection they had and just the type of teammates and the effort they played with. But young guys get the opportunity, and we'll kind of see where it fits.
I think it's interesting that he mentions taking more shots. Like, the running the ball thing is obvious, especially this weekend. The Saints' run defense has been fairly miserable. We'll talk about that with our old friend Matt Paris coming up at 5 o'clock. He left the Commanders beat last year to go and cover the Saints. Chase Young soon followed him, so that's a fun tidbit. We'll get into that with Paris, but we'll do that at 5 o'clock. But I think it's interesting that Cliff mentions taking shots as a potential option too, where some of their big plays would come in, say, the screen game to Eckler. Well, now do you need to instead of moving the ball with short passes and long runs, you need to move the ball with just a long ball through the air. And whether that's Terry or maybe even a guy, he mentioned some young guys like Ben Sinnott getting a ball up the seam, a little bit more explosive, dynamic player than Zach Ertz, even though Ertz is much more reliable in a lot of ways. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Cliff experiments over these next couple of weeks. Speaking of experiments, Bill Belichick is the new head coach at the University of North Carolina. What in the world do we make of this? And it could signal a new path forward in college football writ large. Got a take for you next on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube as well, if you like, at the Team 980. By the way, if you're using the Odyssey app, you can leave us a voicemail by hitting the microphone. That's about a third of the way down the page underneath where it says the Team 980. Just hit that, record whatever it is that you want to tell us, and we're checking them. And Anthony, at some point soon, I'd like to have a voicemail debut on the show. I'm putting that out there into the ether.
I got you. Hey, look, I'm on here right now as we speak. I'm checking.
Nothing yet?
Nah, not today.
I know the feature is just brand new. So maybe you, yes, you, could be the first. I'm just saying. So I can't believe I'm about to say this sentence. The University of North Carolina has hired Bill Belichick to be their next football coach. Yes, the 6-time Super Bowl winning head coach who has 49 years of head coaching of NFL experience. 49. He's coached in the NFL outside of 2024, so like this past year. He's been in the NFL since 1975. Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator with the Giants, was on a bunch of different staffs before that, head coach in Cleveland, had his like one-day stint with the Jets, and mostly, obviously, most famous for being the head coach of Tom Brady's championship teams in New England. Yeah, that Bill Belichick is going to be the next head coach at the University of North Carolina. And do I think this could fail spectacularly? Oh, buddy, do I. Oh, I sure do. But I wanna for a second give Belichick and the folks at the University of North Carolina some level of benefit of the doubt. Some level of like, hey, instead of going, what are they thinking? And asking it rhetorically, let's ask it for real. What are they thinking? I think on a baseline level, college football is more professional now than it has ever been because of NIL. So the idea that you have a coach who is very much used to dealing with professional players, people that have money, people that have agency, right? Old school college coaching in many ways thrived on the fact that the players had no power. You don't like it? Well, transferring, you're going to have to sit out of here. You really want to do that, bucko? You're not making any money. I'm in charge of your scholarship, my way or the highway, kid. Not anymore. Now the kid can be like, bleep you. I hate you. You are an abusive, terrible coach, and I'm not going to let you treat me like that. I'm going to go somewhere else. There's also kids that just like want to be babied, and so the spectrum is there's plenty of coaches, most coaches treat players fine, but they're just not as good enough on the depth chart, and they want to go somewhere else. And sometimes that's fine too. The amicable nature of like, hey, maybe I'm going to go to a smaller school that's maybe more appropriate for my level. Some players still sit it out. But the point is, now that players have the power and you need someone who has maybe a different experience type going the pro route, even though everyone's not on a one-year deal in the pros, there is a lot more agency for NFL players. And so Belichick has experience managing that on some level. His way of managing that, we'll come back to that because I think that's a question mark, but it is worth saying. I do also think on Belichick's side, he is telling the truth when he says the thing that he enjoys the most about coaching is teaching. This is a man that if he was offered a professorship at the Naval Academy, where he grew up when his dad was the coach there, or was a coach there, that he would he'd probably take that teaching history. Like, Belichick loves the history of football. He loves the X's and O's. He loves to teach it. He likes to be out there on the field. This is what we're going to do. This is why we do it. And he's excellent at it. I mean, that is the thing that really sticks out about his tenure with the Patriots specifically, which is his era of coaching that I'm most familiar with. But even if you go back and read your own history books on kind of what he did with the Giants, yeah, they had great players, led by Lawrence Taylor, who might be the greatest defensive player in the history of the league. But all of his teams always were multiple in what they could do defensively, and he was really good at making sure that the game plan was tailored to taking away what the opponent did best. I mean, it's because unlike a lot of other coaches who just like, this is what we do, he was capable on a week-by-week basis of teaching either fully new stuff or tweaking the stuff that's there at a really, really high level so that the defense, which was his specialty, would look different to attack something different every single week based off of what the weakness of the or the strength of the opponent. And in college, you have to be an exceptional teacher. It's part of the deal. You're teaching kids, and they're coming from all these different high school programs where they got various levels of good and bad coaching. And if they want to become pros, which all of them that go D1 do, they're probably going to be open to listening to one of the greatest coaches of all time and lean into the teaching that Belichick does. So on the North Carolina side, they get this pro, and not to mention, specifically, they are getting Bill Belichick. So, like, philosophically, I think the pro idea is interesting for colleges. And the recruiting game is so much different, especially if you have, like, a GM or whatever you want to call it, and Belichick is bringing Mike Lombardi, of all people, to be his GM. If you have someone to take care of the recruiting, you can truly mostly just do the coaching. And the GM goes out and is like, hey, you want to play for Bill Belichick or even another coach that's not Bill Belichick that played in the NFL? I think that's appealing to a lot of kids who, especially coming out of high school, not to mention in the portal, want to go to the NFL. These kids want the best opportunity, and learning from Bill Belichick is a pretty good way to do it. And also, if you're North Carolina, frankly, is anyone in college football going to outcoach Bill Belichick? There was one guy that I would trust to outcoach Bill Belichick, maybe, and it was Nick Saban. He retired. So, from an X's and O's schematic standpoint, North Carolina, I mean, there was an old joke. I'm trying to think, Anthony, I might need you to Google this, but I doubt you'll remember. There was some pro coach that went to college. And the joke was that they were going to have a schematic advantage. For some reason, it's Bobby Petrino in my head. But Petrino actually was good as a coach, and he was a terrible person. And there's a whole bunch of problems with Bobby Petrino, but there was the whole schematic advantage thing. Remember who that was?
Yeah, I know who Bobby Petrino is.
Was it Petrino or was it someone else? I remember who it was, and it's appropriate that we're talking about Belichick. It was Charlie freaking Weiss. When he went to Notre Dame, they were like, oh, well, he's an NFL guy. We'll have a schematic advantage. And Charlie Weiss, unfortunately, did not have a schematic advantage. They were poopsy. Belichick, he's Bill Belichick. They will have a schematic advantage. They will be all over. Like, these college offenses are so simple. He's going to destroy them schematically. He's got to get his guys to execute, but, like, he's Bill Belichick. That's kind of the point. So that's why North Carolina does it. Specific to Bill Belichick, though, I think there's a slight problem. Bill Belichick's communication style wore on 30-year-olds. How the hell is he going to talk to 19-year-olds? That seems to be a flaw in the plan. That seems to be an issue where, all right, guys, we're going to hoodie. Like, he's not the most dynamic guy. He's 72 years old. You're going to have all these other young coaches out there ripping and running and doing all their things. A very specific kind of player will want to go play for Bill Belichick. That player might also want to leave after a year of playing for Bill Belichick. And I just don't know how this is going to work in the long term. And I think there is a tremendous chance that it blows up in all of their faces. And last but not least, in a sport that is built now as much as ever on recruiting, and that recruiting is now double-edged on high school recruiting and the portal, Bill Belichick was a terrible general manager for the entire latter half of his stint in New England. So he hires Mike Lombardi as this GM type who was doing media stuff. I don't know how much Mike Lombardi's doing college football recruiting. It seems like they need to make some really smart hires, and maybe they will. Like, he's Bill Belichick. if you're a hotshot recruiter somewhere and Belichick calls you, you probably go, yeah, I'll come work for you, coach, for the experience, if nothing else. But, Anthony, I do feel like this is a slightly flawed plan that could blow up spectacularly. Now, if you're at the University of North Carolina, worth the risk? Probably. You're Belichick? I don't know why this is the job you wanted, but sure, I guess.
Do you think it could have a Deion Sanders type?
But the thing is, Deion is Deion, man. Deion is prime time. Deion is a personality. Deion is someone who is electric, and he's a good football coach, clearly. What he's done at Jackson State and now what he's done in 2 years at Colorado, where he's got that. I mean, part of it is he's good at getting the players. Guys want to go play for him, and he'll be like, I know how to turn you into a star. I don't, like, is Belichick looking at some 18-year-old kid, some 17-year-old hotshot quarterback going, hey, buddy, I coach Tom Brady. I can turn you into a star. I mean, maybe. That's a pretty good card to pull out of your back pocket to be like, oh, you're the next young quarterback? I was Tom Brady's head coach. What's up? Just when that kid's like, yeah, I don't know. That was pretty young when that happened. Didn't you also draft Mac Jones? That would be pretty funny. Can you imagine some 17-year-old throwing Mac Jones at Belichick's face?
Insane.
I want a camera on that. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. I don't think the North Carolina video department would probably put that one out. Anyway, it's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And when we get back, we'll be joined by our pal Dan Pizzuta from the 33rd Team for his weekly hit. Matt Paris coming up talking Commander Saints at 5. It's Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. Right now, it is our pleasure to welcome back to the show our pal Dan Pizzuta. Of course, Dan is a writer for the 33rd Team. He joins us each and every Thursday here on the Team 980. Dan, what's up, dude? How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well as well. And actually, I would love to start with you today on tonight's game, Thursday nighter, San Francisco and LA. We do a weekly tier rankings, Dan, and I never know what the hell to do with the Rams because some weeks they're awesome, and then other weeks you're like, what happened? It does feel, though, that their offensive line is kind of getting right, and maybe they are entering or re-entering a dangerous phase here that if they can just stay healthy, they could maintain. Is that overly optimistic, or where are you on this Rams team as they kind of round into form, and obviously you're coming off that big win over Buffalo?
Yeah, I'm certainly similar to you where you kind of always want a little more from the Rams, or at least want a little more consistency than they've shown. And they have had some of those offensive line issues, and that's been, part of the problem so far. Even when guys have been healthy, they've either been in and out of the lineup, but they just haven't been like 100%. And that's really come from like the interior of the line too, that they really worked this offseason to kind of bring in a lot of mass. They wanted to be this big, heavy kind of offensive line where they can run a lot of their, man type of stuff. And they've been successful in the ground game. It hasn't worked quite as well in the pass game, but when that offensive line has been good, this has been a good offense, and when Kupp and Nakua have been on the field. So I'm really interested to see what they end up doing tonight, because they've been this team that, because of that offensive line, what they did the past last half of last season, running a lot of pistol, using a lot of, the running up the middle. But against Buffalo, they went back to kind of the 2021 offense that they had with Matthew Stafford in empty about 20% of the time. And they kind of went back into pushing the ball vertically from there. So I'm really interested to see if that's something that's going to continue for them tonight, because if that's what they feel more comfortable in, that's when a lot of these points and a lot of these like crazy Matthew Stafford throws are going to happen. So if they continue that and they kind of go back to what that offense was in like the Super Bowl year, when they were just pushing the ball down the field from empty more than we've seen any offense do previously, I think that's going to be really exciting. I think that's kind of a way you can probably get to San Francisco tonight too, with some of how their defense is structured, and kind of, plugging and playing some players that they had in that secondary too.
Well, then that does bring us to San Francisco, who I had finally written off. I was finally like, you know what? This is the year. It's over. Everything's done. And I know that what they did to Chicago has a lot to do with Chicago too, but they ran roughshod over the Bears on Sunday. Did you see anything that gives you real hope of signs of life for the 49ers, or was that a mere blip that they were running over the Chicago Bears because the Bears let go of the rope?
Yeah, that was interesting, because it was definitely one of those things where with the Bears, it was just, you lost. It's kind of similar to what we saw with the Jets. There were a lot of problems with the coaching staff. Head coach probably should have gone, but you saw the immediate impact of losing the defensive play caller there. So the Bears were kind of all over the place on defense. But we did see with San Francisco, it was kind of perfect mix of some of the more traditional Shanahan stuff we've known from that offense over the past couple of years, and a lot of the kind of pure drop back Brock Purdy stuff we've seen from the beginning of this season. So he was doing a lot of that, finding some tight windows. But then you kind of look at what George Kittle was doing. I think he had 6 receptions on all 6 of his targets, and had like one of the highest yards after the catch we'd seen for a tight end over the past couple of years. So he was just able to kind of run through the middle of that defense. So it was combined with a lot of the different types of San Francisco offenses that we've seen. And I think if you do look at what the Rams are kind of struggling to do, is they don't really have that linebacker play. And the secondary you can take advantage of a little bit. So if they are able to hold up on the offensive line, you're able to kind of get through that middle of the Los Angeles defense. I think there are going to be some opportunities for some of those big plays, either, if you have Juwan Jennings in the slot, or Kittle, running against those linebackers. I think there are still those opportunities to create some of those big plays that Shanahan has been able to do. And Purdy has been very quick to try to and aggressive to try to hit. So I think we're going to see a push and pull with both of these offenses trying to hit some of those big plays tonight.
The NFC West is still very much up for grabs. A San Francisco win tonight would tremendously help Seattle, but right now Seattle with a 1-game lead on LA, and they play in the final game of the regular season. Seattle's schedule is more difficult. Who do you think ultimately comes out of this, and can the second place team finish well enough that they're challenging the Commanders for that 7 spot?
So I'll start with the second one. I really don't think so. I think Washington has banked enough wins right now and they're still, I think, playing at a high enough level that I think they are pretty secure in where they're going to be in that wild card spot. So I don't see a second team coming out of the NFC West right now. And it's tough because this Seattle defense is playing really well, and they've really flipped the switch over the second half of the season, where I think they have the pieces in place, and that kind of Mike Macdonald's scheme has really started to set into what the players feel comfortable doing. So I think they should be the favorite right now. I think if you look at FTN, they have a 51% chance right now for Seattle to get in. It's about 44 for the Rams. I'd probably lean that way too. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams are able to make a run here and that last game of the season does kind of decide the division. That wouldn't surprise me at all either.
Yeah, if it is that, there's a really good chance that game is Sunday Night Football game. It used to be, I always have it in my head as game 256 because that's what Al Michaels used to always say on Sunday Night Football, but they added a 17th game and Al Michaels doesn't do Sunday Night Football anymore. So whatever the 17-game version of that is, where especially if Washington has the 7 seed lock up and it's winning in, losing out, that's probably Sunday Night Football on what I guess is now week 18. Last weekend of the regular season. Dan Pizzuta, writer for the 33rd Team, is with us here on the Hoffman Show. Obviously, we're dealing with some surprise news, I think, this week, Dan, with the Noah Brown news that he is out with a pretty significant internal injury. When you watch the Washington offense, how big of a loss is Brown, and how do they, what formula do you think that Cliff uses to replace him, from De'Ami Brown to Luke McCaffrey to the newly signed KJ Osborne?
Yeah, I think it definitely is a loss just because he is the guy who is playing that other outside receiver, and kind of as we talked about, so many times with at least the version of the Cliff Kingsbury offense up until, 2 weeks ago, where there wasn't a lot of movement for these wide receivers. He was the guy who was playing that, right outside receiver. The thing is that we did talk about last week, going into what we did see them move around guys a little bit. So I do wonder if that is going to be something that sparks a little more movement for this offense. And hopefully that would be the way they do it, using McLaurin a little more in the slot, using him on the right side too. But again, I've always liked De'Ami Brown. Obviously, that has not been something that has really fully, developed into a guy who's been, a top 2 or even a top 3 receiver for this team. But I think he can kind of give some of that vertical stretch. And hopefully, I think he's probably a guy that steps up. I could see McCaffrey, getting a little more run kind of in the slot. So I think it's going to be kind of a mix and match type of thing to kind of fill in the Noah Brown role. I think you still have a lot is going to be put more on Terry McLaurin's plate, probably has an even bigger target share than he has. But I think moving him around, hopefully, if that's something that they, do adjust to, is going to help make some of those targets come easier than they have. So I'll be really interested to see, just how philosophically they do get Brown's role set up in the offense. And I think it'll be more interesting to see how they do that through the scheme and alignment than just a one-for-one player, because I'm hoping that's not necessarily what they're going to do.
Totally agree, and that seems to be the messaging so far from Cliff and from DQ. On the other side of the ball, you have a New Orleans Saints team that started on fire this year. They were 2-0. They scored 100 points in their first 2 games, and then they have been just mostly terrible since, including in their win last week against the Giants. Just the Giants were somehow worse. But one thing that I haven't said this out loud this week, Dan, I've been saving this question for you. If you're Washington, are you at all scared that they run that, Clint Kubiak is a Kyle Shanahan disciple. The Shanahan, and adjacent schemes have at times given Dan Quinn defenses a whole lot of trouble. Is there any level of concern there if you are Washington, or are the Saints just so untalented on offense that there is no scheme in the world that would scare you that much if you are Washington?
Yeah, I'm going to lean toward the latter here, and especially because it seems like Derek Carr is not going to play, which, I think it seemed like he was going to be out for a while, and now they're still saying he might go, but I think they're just kind of pushing that off. I wouldn't expect him to play. So if you either have, Spencer Rattler, who looked like he just didn't belong in the games earlier this season, when he, as someone who has to watch and rank all of the quarterbacks every week, that it was not a fun experience kind of watching him. And then if he doesn't go, that it's Jake Haener. So I think there is definitely, you're either getting a not 100% Derek Carr or two quarterbacks that are probably easily, going to be the worst starting quarterback in the league when they go into the lineup. So I don't think there's a lot of scheme that's going to be done there. You're going to have Alvin Kamara, who I think is playing really well and coming on a bounce back season. But outside of that, yeah, there's not a lot of talent on that offense. And I think there's only so much scheme that's going to be able to help them. I mean, there might be one big Marquez Valdes-Scantling play per game, which somehow that has happened. I don't know how, even when the Saints have not been playing well, that you can still somehow get one big MVS play per game that somehow has been like a 70-yard touchdown in the past couple of weeks. But outside of that, I really don't think there's a lot that scares you on that offense.
Yeah, they are very aggressive, at least with Carr at quarterback. And it's like, okay, that's cool. And in some ways, it's like, hey, if we just throw it deep enough, one of these will hit or we'll get a PI or something. But it is no way to live down in, down out in the NFL, which actually is an oddly smooth transition, Dan, to the last thing I want to ask you about. Is Dan Pizzuta from the 33rd team is with us, which is the Philadelphia Eagles offense. And this Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Tiff or not, Brandon Graham putting it out there in the public. Jordan Mailata was asked about it today, and I think he said something along the lines of, like, it's not the Jalen and A.J. show. This team is supposed to be the second best team in the NFC. They've been rolling people since September. The Commanders have them next week, so a lot of eyes, obviously, on what's going on there for Washington selfishly. But, how confident are we in this Eagles team to pull through when it seems like this is kind of some similar type of stuff, both the on-field, perhaps, reasons behind the tiff and locker room kerfuffles, let's call them, for lack of a better word, that derailed them last December when they were also 10 and whatever going into it?
Yeah, I do think there has been better production so far. So I think the structure of the offense is better. Although I do understand why there might be some frustrations from individual players. But I think, A.J. Brown is still like second in the league in yards per route run. So it's not like he's not getting his in his offense too. But there are definitely plays within this offense where, there could be a big play, but Hurts is, taking a little longer to process. And the first window where it would have been open is kind of passed up, and he's holding on to the ball a little bit, and then it probably usually ends up turning into a positive play more often than not. But it's not, the design of when, it could have been a bigger play, maybe if the ball was out earlier in the down. So there are a lot of those in this Eagles offense a lot. And I think when I'm going back and looking at these quarterbacks, I'm not sure there's a bigger gap between the individual play of a quarterback and his production in terms of efficiency and EPA per play and that stuff as there is in Jalen Hurts right now, because when I'm watching him, it does look like it's a very kind of disjointed quarterback who's not really playing at the top of his game. But then when you kind of look at what he's able to produce, the way they're still able to, get the ball on third downs, and there's such a wide margin for error because when they do have all of these guys on the field in the passing game where you have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and then you have Barkley who's able to run. You only need to get it to the 1 yard line, and Jalen Hurts is going to be, pushing it in and gets a rushing touchdown from there. So yeah, I think there is still a wide margin for error here where I'm not necessarily worried about this Eagles offense suddenly, just completely collapsing over these next couple games. But I do understand why there might be some frustration because it's not completely optimized in a way that you kind of would expect with all of these pieces in place and what the potential could be of this offense. But even when it's not reaching that full potential, it's still been pretty good.
No, I think you described that so well because he has 108 yards passing last week. And you watch them, and just from a process standpoint, I mean, even the touchdown throw that he throws to Devontae Smith when they're in the red zone and it's that out route through some traffic, A.J. Brown's wide open. And based off the route concept, they run a pick for him. I would think he's the primary. And it's why don't you just throw A.J. on the slant? Now, he winds up throwing a touchdown pass, so how mad do you get? And other plays where it's oh, that guy was open, but you ran for 13 yards on 3rd and 11. So I like the EPA stuff. His ability on the tush push. You can't just say that doesn't count. But I would be so fascinating to see his EPA per play numbers without all the 1 yard touchdowns or the 1 yard rushing gains and how that compares. Because his drop off, if you take out those plays, would be tremendous in that particular stat. The thing is, though, at the end of the day, those are really important situations that he is maybe the best in football at, and balancing those two facts has got to be a really hard thing to do as a talent evaluator, both nevertheless for our jobs and talking about it, but if you are Howie Roseman and you're thinking about the future of your franchise and you already paid him, but you got a bunch of more years on a big amount of money.
Yeah, it is certainly interesting. If you just look at what he did in week 14, just on its own, he was, I think, 20th in success rate, so only a 39% success rate, but he was 8th in EPA per play. So that's an extreme because I think he did have his worst game of the season this past week. But those are kind of the extremes that you kind of see from what he has been doing. So again, there is such a big margin for error in this offense that they have been able to get through it. And we have seen Hurts play at a better level. I think there has been a bit of a drop off from him as a processor and a passer from even what we saw a little bit earlier in the year. I think he was a little better, and even especially the first half of last season. So I think there still is going to be potential for him to kind of improve as a passer, but right now, yeah, there is definitely this disconnect between how good this offense can be, how good it currently is, and I do understand that there could be some internal frustration about the gap there, even though the results have been good.
Dan Pizzuta, 33rd Team. You can read his work there, the weekly quarterback rankings, deep dives on all kinds of different things. Always great stuff, and he's always great with us here on the radio as well. Dan, always appreciate you, sir, and we will talk to you next week.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Dan Pizzuta, everybody, with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, we'll check in with Matt Paris down in New Orleans. You, of course, remember Matt from his time working at the Washington Times covering the Commanders, but now he is covering the Saints for the Times-Picayune. So we'll get the latest on what the Saints' plan is at quarterback and everything else going on down in New Orleans. But want to first remind you that you can watch the game with some very good friends of yours this weekend. You can watch the Commanders with JP from the Sports Junkies and our Burgundy and Gold Game Day crew, including Denton Day and Linnell Willingham this Sunday at Center Pocket in Bowie. Burgundy and Gold pregame game day is live starting at 11 a.m. That's Center Pocket in Bowie. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. Paris joins us next. It's Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. Never read the comments coming up at 5:30. Right now, though, 5 o'clock, top story of the day, Commanders Saints this weekend. It's time to welcome an old friend back to the show.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Matt Paris used to work for the Washington Times. Now he works for the New Orleans Times-Picayune, and I'm sure he is a very busy man doing many radio and podcast hits like this week. What's up, Matthew? How are you, my friend?
Oh, no, I'm pretty good, man. I haven't been too busy, but I appreciate you having me on here.
Really? I'm surprised. You're like, this is about the ninth one that I've done, and I got 7 more tomorrow.
I was on Sheehan earlier.
Okay.
Went on a couple podcasts, went on Ben's podcast. So no time, though. Ouch.
Yeah, well, hey, look, that's a hard invite to get. We all go to bed at night dreaming of the John Keim Report invite. I get it like once a year, and I've known the man for almost a decade. I was texting with him earlier, though, so I got that going for me, which is nice. All right, Matthew, the number one question on your beat this week is what at the heck are the Saints going to do at quarterback? Do they know yet?
Yeah, I think they know. I think they're playing a little bit of mind games. It honestly reminds me of week 1 of last season when the Cardinals were like, oh, we don't know if we're going to start Josh Dobbs or Clayton Tune. Like, I don't know for absolute certainty that it's going to be Jake Haener, but I think all signs are kind of pointing there. I mean, I would just be shocked if Derek Carr was able to play this week, not necessarily just because of the hand, but he's also in concussion protocol. He dealt with a few concussions last season, which I think complicates things. He just doesn't seem like he's going to be healthy enough to go, and so then the Saints have a choice. Is it going to be Jake Haener or is it going to be Spencer Rattler? And Rattler already had his opportunity earlier this season with those 3 games. He didn't light the world on fire, and so you're kind of just looking at the next man situation, and that's Haener, who's still a relatively young quarterback, and I think they're going to give him a chance, but I can't say with absolute certainty. That's just more of an educated guess. But I would expect Haener. Excuse me.
So what's the for folks here that are trying to follow along from afar? Rattler's a 5th round pick from this year. He was pretty terrible in his 3 games, but there's first 3 games he was a 5th round pick. Okay, what's Haener's story? What has he done in the league? Like, what's the scouting report on him, and why would they? But even though he's not that far of a vet, like they did draft Rattler in the 5th round, why would they want to still give him that chance?
Yeah, it's Haener's actually a 4th round pick from a year ago. So in terms of just drafting, he went to Fresno State, Carson College. Everyone describes him with moxie. He's not quite Taylor Heineke, but he's very kind of competitive. Ran these 2-minute drills in training camp with just talking up and down the field. He kind of has a fun edge to him. I think more of a pocket passer though, can use his legs, but Rattler's definitely the more memorable one in terms of when he was playing. They got him out in space, tried to roll him out a bunch, and I think with Haener they would be a little bit more. I think trying to keep him in the pocket and those sorts of things, but. They like them both. It's just, what's the ceiling on both of them? I'm not sure. Rattler kind of reminds me more of Sam Howell in terms of, the prestigious college quarterback who fell in the draft and that everyone talked themselves into. But I think with Haener, he's a little bit more of an unknown, but I think the Saints do like him.
It's kind of funny you mentioned the Howell thing with Rattler, because I feel like some of the same national media quarterback types that really liked Sam Howell also really like Spencer Rattler. And then Rattler had those couple of games earlier this year where they're like, oh, no, I shouldn't like Spencer Rattler that much. For either of these guys, Matthew Paris with us, of course, Saints reporter now for the New Orleans Times-Picayune. For either of these guys, I think the bigger problem, maybe even beyond their own abilities, is the abilities of those around them. They're the Saints without Chris Olave, and I know Alvin Kamara not only is not having quite as productive a season as the tremendous player he's been for most of the last decade, and he also was sick today, and I guess missed practice. So he's not even getting out there with some of the reps with these guys. Just like, how limited are the Saints offensively, and how does that maybe show up in these games, no matter who's playing quarterback?
Yeah, it's a mix of, I actually think the offense has done okay given how many guys they've missed this season. Clint Kubiak has come in here. I think has done an impressive job given the circumstances. Kamara, not to correct you on your own show, but he's had actually a really bounce-back season. I mean, he was coming off kind of a career year where, turning 29, he didn't really know how much he had left. The system has really benefited from him. The Saints actually gave him a new contract, in part because it was coming to a head, but also because he earned it with his play. So he's had a really impressive season, on pace for a career high. And so he's kind of the focal point of their offense. But the run game also isn't the same because another guy you didn't mention there was Taysom Hill. Yeah. He tore his ACL and is out for the year. And that's a big loss for him just from a versatility standpoint. You hear all these people in New Orleans talk about the importance of Taysom Hill. And when I was in Washington, I thought it was kind of like overblown, but no, it turns out it's actually right, and he's really important to them. So, I definitely think they miss him, and we'll see if their run game can still be effective. But it's really the run game that is kind of the meat and potatoes of their offense right now, combined with some deep shots based off play action.
So let me circle back on the Kamara thing because I think that's interesting. To the number that I saw earlier this week, and I think I see this a little bit when I watch him on tape earlier in the week, is he's not quite as explosive as he used to be. Sure. And the number to back that up that came from Next Gen Stats was that his missed tackle rate is the lowest it's been since 2018. But to your point, like, the production is still there. So how is he getting that? Is this Kubiak using him very well? Is he not having to have as many missed tackles because the O-line's doing their thing? Like, what's the dots to connect there to make both of those numbers make sense since they are both technically, statistically true?
Yeah, I think you hit on it. I mean, I think last year, going back, the problem with last year's run game is that because Kamara was so historically explosive, is they were still really relying on the run would do, and then you would just cut back inside. He couldn't hit that cut back as much. Now they're running these outside zones where the cutback is still important, but there are more there. The offensive line is doing a much better level of getting to the much better job of getting to the second level. They drafted Taliesin Fuaga out of Oregon State. He's been a huge pickup for them at left tackle, particularly in the run game. Trevor Penning, who looked like a lost cause, has had a real kind of surprising season where he's held up okay at right tackle after moving him there. And so, he has benefited from the line a little bit, but he's had some hard runs, and he's a bigger running back than you would expect. I mean, he, as being a complimentary guy early in his career, he still has some size to him, and so this scheme really does fit him, I think.
Matt Paris, Saints reporter for the Times-Picayune, with us here on the Hoffman Show. And speaking of old friends, real quick, can you just tell the story of like when Chase Young walked into the locker room and saw you after you got traded last year, after you had already made your way down to New Orleans? So I talked to Chase this week, and we had never really talked like, hey, I covered you in Washington, until like this week. He was like, I was like, yeah, I covered you. He's like, yeah, I know. Obviously he knew, but like, I don't know, man. Like, Chase just isn't like engaging like that. Like John Ridgway, yes, John Ridgway right.
knows who I am.
Yeah, John Ridgway was like, oh, Matt.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, John Ridgway was a lot more welcoming. Chase, Chase, that's fine. We don't have to have a personal conversation like that. I just have a really interesting conversation with Chase, though. He feels like he's having a career year, and you can read about that all in the Times-Picayune after this call.
There you go. So we'll send people there for the full story, but can you give us a little bit of that? Because I was going to ask you, and like, again, Next Gen Stats, a great bastion of information. His pass rush win rate is higher this year than it has ever been in his career. I still don't know that he's like this ultimate pass rusher that he was thought to be when they drafted him here. He is the hard edge setter and all those things. So like, what do they like about him down there, and how does he feel about the year that he's having?
Yeah, he feels like he has a lot more experience now than he did in Washington. And, he kind of, if you think back to what Rivera would always used to say with, like, he needs to be more of a power rusher than a speed rusher, and Rivera kind of couldn't stand that stutter step that Young used to do. Chase was like, I know what he's talking about now. Like, he kind of realizes that you don't necessarily – there are a lot of different ways to rush the passer, and you don't have to be fancy just for being fancy's sake. Like, he feels like he's getting to the pass rusher or the quarterback a little bit more. I mean, the thing with him, though, is he still just generates more pressures than he does sacks. I mean, he only has 3.5 sacks this season. So I was kind of talking to him about that, he said, yeah, he wishes he had more sacks, but he feels like he's still disrupting and being disruptive. And I think the Saints would generally agree. But the reason you can't say, like, he's having a stellar year is because those sacks aren't there. And I'll be really interested to see what he gets on the open market next year, just because he's fourth in pressures, but way down on sacks. It's kind of an interesting parallel or dichotomy, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, and you can read more about it in Matt's article at NOLA.com and in the Times-Picayune. All right, so the interior of the Saints' defensive line seems to be the much bigger problem. As you look at this matchup on a whole, is that kind of the Commanders' running game versus the Saints' rush defense the biggest determining factor this weekend in your eyes?
I would absolutely say so, and it's not just the run game in terms of Brian Robinson. It's what Jalen Daniels can do to them, because this is a team that, it's not a one-to-one situation from last season to this season, but go back and watch what Josh Dobbs did to them in the Minnesota game last year. This is just a scheme and a team that really struggles to deal with mobile quarterbacks, and I think Jalen Daniels can have a field day going against these guys. I talked to Cam Jordan today in the locker room, and he sounded already annoyed at kind of the prospect of having to face Jayden Daniels. He said he was kind of like a young deer. He wasn't just like – he said Jayden Daniels wasn't just a mobile quarterback, but that he's kind of like a young experience where you knock him down and he gets just right up and kind of has a bounce to him. So I think they're going to have their hands full with that specifically. But the year that Brian Robinson is having too just makes it a lot more dangerous. I mean, you look at go back to the Philadelphia matchup against these guys early in the season now. Saquon Barkley had a big day, and it wasn't necessarily Jalen Hurts. It was because of the threat of Hurts, Barkley also had just an incredible game.
Matt Paris, again, Saints reporter for the Times-Picayune, with us for another minute or two here on the Hoffman Show. The other big reunion this weekend, besides Matt, you welcoming all your former colleagues down there to the Superdome, is Marshawn Lattimore is going to finally make his Commanders debut, and he's going to do it on the field where he has spent most of his NFL career. When you think about Lattimore, the player, and what he is at this point, like, what do you expect him to be in Washington? And, specific to this weekend, is there anything that you're going to be watching for from Marshawn?
Yeah, I think he'll be fired up to face them. I mean, that's kind of what guys in the locker room have said, is that, Marshawn Lattimore is a guy that really gets up for the big games and the best receivers. Now, he's not necessarily facing those receivers in New Orleans, with apologies to Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who's had a very nice resurgence here after signing here. But I think he's going to be fired up based on the way things ended. I think both sides were kind of ready to move on. And as for Washington, I think he allows them to play a little bit more man. He's still an excellent press man corner, and will allow them to be a little bit more versatile than I think Washington has been.
And then last thing I wanted to ask you, Matt, is there are, like, LSU's football, reach down there is tremendous. And in the history of their program, they haven't had a ton of guys at the quarterback position that have gone on to be great pros until Joe Burrow a couple of years ago, and now obviously Jaden's doing what he's doing up here. That Saints home crowd is fantastic, and is typically one of the most partisan crowds in the league. But with an LSU star quarterback coming to town, do you think that you'll feel that at all in the building on Sunday and the reception for Daniels specifically?
I do. Yeah, I think people will he's a reason to go to the game. I mean, their crowds still sell out, or they still draw very good crowds, even when the team isn't doing as well, at least this season. But the atmosphere from the first 2 games of the season, when it seemed like, holy cow, the Saints might actually have something here, to the 7-game losing streak, to where they are now, it definitely dropped off. The dome isn't nearly as loud as when you were on the beat with. I think you were at those.
Oh yeah, no, those Drew Brees games. I mean, the one where he set the record. I mean, that was nuts.
That's like the loudest I've ever heard. I haven't heard the dome that loud since being here, a year and a half now almost. So they still have, I think, some work to do to win back the fans. But I think to answer your original question, they're going to be pretty fired up to see Jaden Daniels, and if he gets a cheer or two, I wouldn't be surprised.
All right, Matt Paris will be there this weekend. Are you taking Keim or anybody to dinner down there, or is Keim disappearing to some magical location that he doesn't want to see anybody?
No, he's scheduled for dinner. I think we're all going to dinner at a Gree, just a nice place down here.
Nice,
closer on my end, and he wanted to go to Pesh, but they were booked up. I did not pull their reservation card fast enough on that. So,
man, that's a bummer. Pesh is excellent. Not that you're barren for choices if your number one spot is sold out. Hey, man, enjoy seeing everybody this weekend. I'm bummed I can't be down there. Thanks for your time as always, and enjoy the rest of the season, man. Yeah,
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. It was great to talk to you.
Absolutely. Matt Paris with us here on the Hoffman Show. Of course, now the Saints reporter for the Times-Picayune. Long time on the beat up here with us in D.C. covering the Commanders. When we get back, quick reaction to some of what Matt had to say, and then it's time for Never Read the Comments on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up at 5:30. Never read the comments. Honestly, kind of a light week. I need to go back through and see if anybody in the last hour and a half, since I put a bunch of comments there before the show, if there's any more comments. It's kind of how it is this week.
You said it was light week?
Yeah, I don't know why. Like, we had a bunch of stuff at the end of last week. I think in part because of the bye week. Like, a lot of comments obviously are typically on our content around the game, and there was no game. So that's less than ideal for the never read the comment section. But we had a bunch of other stuff we talked about. So we have enough to do the segment.
Yeah.
I just, if I can fortify it with some more, check that out in the break. Andy, you just played the Thursday Night Football theme coming out of the break.
Yes, sir.
Because we are going to predict / talk about the game tonight. First of all, some thoughts on the game. Do you think we get a good game tonight? Or do, the Niners fall back off? Do the Rams do something weird? I can't decide what I think tonight. Also, by the way, this is not the best game on television tonight. The best game on television tonight is UConn Notre Dame at 7 o'clock.
At 7 p.m. Today is Thursday.
Yeah. Thank God for us. Personally, we're off at 6:30 tonight, Virginia Tech hoops. So I'll actually be able to get home in time to catch tip-off. Pretty pumped about that. And because that's a 2-hour game, won't miss much of Thursday Night Football if I want to flip over after.
You are absolutely right.
So great sports night. Great random Thursday in December sports night. An actual good Thursday Night Football game on paper. And maybe the best college basketball matchup remaining on the schedule for the rest of the season. I mean, USC, UCLA will be good. There'll be some other good games with some of the star players. Iowa pulled out a big win the other night, but, Paige Beckers, Hannah Hidalgo, one-on-one, let's party.
Man, yeah.
Olivia Miles,
AZ Fudd, yeah. Let's go. Hey, look, you got me hyped, man. Because
let's go.
Mentally it's here. It's here, but I forgot all about it. Thursday, 7 p.m. Hey, look, I'm locked in, Craig.
I'm pretty pumped. The only bad part is I was planning initially on watching Hard Knocks tonight, and I was like, nope, no time in the schedule. Guess I'll save that one for tomorrow.
Yep.
Anyway, Thursday Night Football is tonight. Rams, 49ers. Good matchup on paper. Interesting series history between these two. Kyle has typically done pretty well against Sean. Rams need this one. Niners kind of need it more. If the Niners get it, though, the best outcome for the Commanders tonight is a Niners win.
Yes.
100%. That's the best thing that can happen. Then Seattle just needs to not fumble the division, and the Commanders have a 2-game lead as long as they don't fumble the Saints game on Sunday, with 3 to go at that point for the final playoff spot. So if the Rams win, they pull into a half game of the Commanders, which the Commanders can re-extend to a full game on Sunday, but then things can get a little dicey. That said, what do you think happens?
I think the Rams keep on scoring, to be honest. Winners of 6 of 8. The offense has looked better. They've gotten healthier. So I'm expecting the Rams to actually go out there and do what they've done all season. The 49ers defense has not been good. Granted, they do get Drake. Well, I'm not going to say they get him back. He's been activated off the reserve injured pup list, Dre Greenlaw.
That's typically a good sign.
Yeah, but would that mean he plays today, though?
Maybe. I mean, I guess, did he practice this week?
That I don't know. I just know he got.
Because they can open. That list is funky, and I haven't dealt with it in a long time. Hold on. Keep talking.
But yeah, granted, it says he will make his debut tonight.
Yeah, I think with that one, you don't have to be pulled off the list. You can open the practice window first, and then they pull the guy off the list Thursday. So yeah, it's funny because on ESPN it says status out. Greenlaw is expected to be activated on Thursday and suit up for the Niners' home matchup against the Rams.
Yeah.
So his status, they need to update that. That should say green, good to go. But San Francisco is without Trent still.
Yep.
And they're also without Malik Mustafa. And so they've got some dudes. I mean, Mason, obviously, McCaffrey, Ayuk's been out. So they definitely have a bunch of dudes out. Garundo is expected to play, but is a little banged up at the running back position. So It's definitely not a full-strength 49ers team. And I think that's probably enough for LA to do their thing. On a short week, I'm definitely interested. I mean, LA's coming off a pretty big emotional high and a pretty physical game where they ran all over Buffalo.
Yeah.
And can you kind of recenter? I think Sean's pretty good at that kind of thing. I just, somewhere in the back of my head, I'm also like, man, Kyle's had Sean's number in this series.
Yeah. I think Purdy's going to have a huge night.
I think it's possible. The one thing, I think Sean fundamentally will be, work with his defensive staff to be like, hey, Kittle's kind of the only guy they got. Can we not leave him open all the time? I know Debo's there, but like against Chicago, man, Kittle was open all over the damn place. That can't happen. I understand how it happens when you're covering against Ayuk and the run game is super, McCaffrey's moving all over the place and, they have some dudes. Like now it is just like Kittle's the number one guy. Kittle and Debo, number one guys. So I would have to think that they have a tighter lid on that. The Rams' pass rush is actually pretty decent, and without Trent, like that offensive line, I'm going to pick the Rams tonight, but I don't feel great about it.
I'm picking the Rams as well.
Okay.
I'm just glad we got our pick in because usually we
text
forget.
Frantically at like 8:14.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, I think the Rams.
We did it on the radio, and all of you heard it. We'll see how that goes. Of course, we'll pick the rest of the games tomorrow around this time. It'll be a speed round as we go in through the entire NFL, as we'll be live at Army-Navy Radio Row tomorrow. Got a couple of guests that are pleasantly interrupting our usual Friday routine, including, by the way, Zach Leonsis is going to join us. Of course, Ted's son, who is a senior executive in the Monumental Sports empire. We'll talk to him about kind of his role and Monumental's approach because he's got a big role at Monumental Sports Network. So I want to talk to Zach about like, hey, you guys as ownership of the team have greenlit this giant rebuild for the Wizards, which is obviously less than ideal for the network. So what are you guys doing on the network side? And we'll see what else we get into with Zach tomorrow as they're doing a whole bunch of stuff at Monumental always here on the Hoffman Show. I think we're going to have Nicole Auerbach at 4:15 on college football. Brian Jones for sure from CBS at 5:45. So we got a bunch of really good stuff. Jacob Hester as well. But we will go around the NFL tomorrow at 5:30. Coming up next, 5:30 on a Thursday does not mean NFL picks. 5:30 on a Thursday, buddy, that means it's time for Never Read the Comments. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980. Reminding you that you can watch the Commanders with JP from the Sports Junkies and our Burgundy and Gold Game Day crew, including Denton Day and Linnell Willingham, this Sunday at Center Pocket in Bowie. Burgundy and Gold pregame game day is live starting at 11 a.m. Be weird if pregame was 11 p.m. 11 a.m. everybody, at the Center Pocket in Bowie. The other thing I was going to tell everybody is that coming up at 6 o'clock, you hear from Cliff Kingsbury and Joe Witt Jr. because it's the Pick Six. We have an hour left in our show because Virginia Tech Hoops is coming up tonight, but it is a Thursday, Anthony, and that means it is time at 5:30 for Never Read the Comments.
To warn them, they didn't listen. Every week, the Hoffman Show goes into the belly of the beast.
We read those comments, baby.
Never read the comments.
All right, you know how this works by now. We cut up the show into pieces you can listen to, or more specifically, watch on demand. Of course, you can listen to it as well, the Hoffman Show podcast, but on demand on YouTube at Craig Hoffman and at the Team 980. We also post full episodes of the Take Command podcast, not only on the Team 980, but at 106.7 The Fan. And then we pull the best comments or the most interesting comments, the comments we want to respond to, and we react to them here on the radio. And Anthony, I'd said we're a little light on comments this week. Let me go double check and make sure there are not any new ones that came up. And thank God that I did, because I forgot about something with KJ Osborne. And Sarah Shong points it out. KJ Osborne was the wide receiver that sparked the Vikings' 33-point comeback against the Colts. He had 150-plus yards and a touchdown in that game. We talked about that, actually, the other day, much to Anthony's chagrin. He catches a lot of red zone touchdowns. Yeah, he's got a fair amount of those in his career. Cool. Here's the part I forgot. Osborne is a great guy. He saved a guy from a burning car last year.
Oh, snap.
And so what did I do? Immediately went to Google, KJ Osborne burning car, and lo and behold, March 7th, 2023, ESPN.com, this article from Vikings writer Kevin Seifert, or ESPN Vikings writer Kevin Seifert, KJ Osborne was, in his own words, in the right place at the right time early Monday morning in Austin, Texas. The Minnesota Vikings wide receiver joined 3 other bystanders in rescuing a man from a burning car underneath a freeway overpass. Osborne first revealed the story Monday afternoon in a podcast interview with ESPN's Adam Schefter. According to a statement released Tuesday by police in Austin, the man was transported to a local hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. They always say wrong place, wrong time, Osborne told Schefter, but I was at the exact right place at the exact right time.
That's dope, dude. You look speechless over there.
I mean, just incredible.
Yeah.
I think obviously this is a big risk. I don't have experience in this. In my head, I'm thinking this car can blow up at any second, and it could be all over. But they were able to rescue the man and get him like 10, 15 feet away. This was like 2:30 in the morning. I was continuing to scroll to see if it's why KJ Osborne was driving around Austin at 2:30 in the morning. But he was. And apparently that was a good thing.
Yeah.
So there you go. KJ Osborne helped save the dude's life. That's a fact you didn't get anywhere else about the Commanders' new wide receiver. Didn't think that'd be a part of the discussion today.
Nah.
But it was. So thanks, Sarah, for that comment. Who knew? Learn new things in the YouTube comment section after all. All right. Let's, since we're talking about KJ Osborne and the wide receivers, let's get to some reaction on the wide receivers and kind of where Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden and everybody goes from here. Make Peace U says, Diami never gets consistent opportunities, but stays on as a backup. He has had some great bombs for TDs during his career. Why is he not used more? Anthony, I always struggle with questions like this because, like, NFL coaches are the best coaches on the planet. They desperately want to win, and their jobs literally depend on it. So there's a huge part of me that's just like, probably because the other guys are better. But that's not very exciting, nor is it very open to the fact that it's clear coaches do make mistakes at times. They are not beyond reproach. They are not perfect. So I want to try to explore this a little deeper, but I also do just want to say up front, because for most of his career, Dyami Brown hasn't been that good. I don't think magically he actually is good now. And the thing is, yes, some of the plays he's made are explosive, but it's not like he's had opportunities in previous years, and he came into this season with 42 catches on his career in 3 years, playing decent minutes. It's not because he was being ignored or misused. He wasn't good at doing the things he needed to do to actually get the football, or when the ball was thrown to him. Obviously, things did not go great. So that's thing one. That said, I do think that Dyami was misused in the previous regime based off his reputation, which was, hey, in North Carolina, I was a run fast, straight guy, down the field, go routes, 9 balls, posts, corners, fades, all that stuff. And I'm just going to run by people, which at North Carolina, because he's 4.3 fast, he could do. In the NFL, he does that on occasion. He had that one game against Tennessee, the one good game that he kind of had as a pro. But I think it became clear as he went on that there was a physicality to him that was actually the better part of his game. And you'd see that show up because Bieniemy and Turner used him a decent amount as a blocker. Part of that was because he was a backup receiver, but he's also really good at it. And it was like, oh, okay. The speed guy that they took in the 3rd round is actually a blocking wide receiver who runs kind of fast. And I think what Cliff has done is they figured out, I don't know how they figured this out, whether it was a training camp thing, whether it was hey, they asked him to do it in the game once, and he did it well, and it's like, shoot, we should do that more. I don't know what it was that sparked this idea, but they found a way to combine the speed and the physicality, which is, we're going to throw this dude screens and let him run through people, and he's good after the catch. And so I think that Dyami's route tree isn't the most nuanced. He's not a tremendous route runner. He doesn't necessarily leverage his speed in ways that other guys do that are that fast. He can run by people. He's not the world's best ball tracker, but he's not bad at it either. But I do think that they found a role for him as a screen guy, as a blocker, as running some more of the physical routes. And I think that actually is the most important thing for the replacing Noah Brown part of this. Because while Dyami's not as big, the physical stuff that Noah did, that can't disappear from the offense. And I think Dyami is best suited amongst their receivers to fill in that gap.
Yeah, I understand, fans wanting to see more and more of Dyami because, again, to your point, when he has really shown up, it's been explosive play after explosive play. But the thing is, and probably what the coaches are more so looking for is just consistency. And it's not just, going deep. It's the all-around aspect of being a wide receiver that they're looking for, that they're asking for.
Right. So, can you create separation? Do you have subtlety in your routes? Do you time the routes properly? Do you understand how to tempo routes? If you're the 3rd receiver, do you run in the progression? Do you run it differently than if you're the 1st receiver? Because as the 3rd receiver, you have time. As the 2nd receiver, you have less time. Primary, you kind of got to get open now. And those things, that subtlety of understanding when to get open is something that can take guys years to really understand, because there's such a thing as getting open too early, right? Or obviously too late. But if you're the 3rd guy in the progression and you're open as soon as that back foot hits, let's say, and then you really should be open when the quarterback hitches, well, now you probably have been recovered. So do you tempo your route properly? There's all these little nuances of playing wide receiver that I don't know that Dyami has owned, but I'm sure he's worked on it. Yeah. And I heard some sound from him on Kime's podcast from the locker room where he talked about what's next, the things I've shown this year, physicality, yards after catch, things like that. And I think he's dead on with his self-assessment. But John asked him, like, hey, what do you need to do moving forward? And he's like, I need to show I can be a complete receiver. And for a guy that was drafted in the 3rd round, like, I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation. Like, if you're a 3rd round guy, you're probably not a starter immediately. Like, if you're a linebacker maybe, or a running back maybe, you start immediately. Those are non-premium positions. But if you're a 3rd round wide receiver, like, you have some holes in your game that you're not going to start immediately. But I think as a 3rd rounder, you're also expected to eventually turn into an eventual starter. And this is, in the last month of a playoff chase, this is a chance for De'Ami Brown, who has gotten better coaching this year and better utilized this year than 3 years of, I don't want to say being wasted, because I don't want to say that it was all those coaches' fault. It's really easy. They're not here anymore. It's suck up to De'Ami, but like, certainly was not maximally utilized nor maximally taught. And so, because no one on the offense was. And so now, can he take what he's learned over the last year since this staff got here, apply it on the highest level in the most opportunity? And for the guy that is an expiring contract, he's year 4, it's rookie, contract. That's how that works. Can he earn himself the most money possible here or somewhere else in the future? So it's a big month for De'Ami Brown. I'm excited for De'Ami because I think he's got some more juice, and we're gonna get a chance to see it. Steven 469 on the Noah Brown injury and kind of the larger impact. Hope this doesn't negatively impact Terry's ability to be moved around and targeted when on the slot right, left. I kind of wonder about this because I think that for this week it could, depending on how in the offense KJ Osborne is and where in the offense KJ Osborne is, and then how they use some other guys. But I kind of think everybody that's left has played a little bit of everywhere. Like Noah, on the snaps that Terry's not on the field, that's most often De'Ami. So De'Ami can go play that X on, sometimes Terry's playing X, sometimes Terry's playing Z. X is kind of your big on the line of scrimmage wide receiver. Z is the guy that's going to play on the same side as the slot receiver, typically in 11 personnel. So 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 receivers. And so he is going to have some more free releases. He might move around a little bit more, all that kind of stuff. And Terry plays both the X and the Z because he typically plays on the left side, which means as the formations shift, that's kind of the funny thing about people complaining about the left side stuff, is a lot of receivers just play X or just play Z, and that can be limiting in its own way. Terry winds up playing both. But if you wind up, hey, Kenyon Mitchell's playing right outside corner, well, let's just move him away from Kenyon Mitchell. So it's limiting in that way. Or, hey, let's get him a 2-way go out of the slot. Okay, if he's always playing outside left, well, X and Z, but what about F? What about whatever they call their slot, whatever? And so, long story short, I think the group of receivers left is versatile enough, including KJ Osborne, that Terry should be able to maintain the movement that he had against Tennessee. And I know that's something that coming out of the Philly and the Dallas games that he and the offensive staff really wanted to do more of, because they realized how limiting it was against Philly, and they realized that some of the stuff that Terry got, slants, comebacks late in that Dallas game, could have been had earlier if they had, one, called some shorter stuff. They were really trying to push the ball down the field in that Dallas game, and they couldn't, both because of coverage, and they just missed a couple opportunities. And if they can move him around, some of that stuff becomes a little bit easier. Because, for instance, if you are let's say there's a 3 receiver side and a 1 receiver. Anthony, make sure that I don't get too in the weeds here. This is your responsibility. Your responsibility, producer / weed whacker. 3-by-1, and let's make it a simple 3-by-1. So you have on the left side Terry, and let's say the ball, just to make this as easy as possible, the ball is on the left hash. So Terry is on the left. It's the boundary side, so the smaller side of the field. And then to the field side, you have 1, 2, 3 receivers. Not in a bunch, not in a stack. They're just 1, 2, 3. All make sense?
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay. If you want to have Terry on the outside, on either side of that, and running a slant, if it's to that field side, that longer side, that is a long throw. even to the boundary in the NFL, because the hashes are fairly narrow, still a pretty long throw. You have him at number 2 or number 3, the inside, like the middle slot or the inside slot, and you want to throw a slant, that's a really quick throw and a really easy way to get the ball in his hands very quickly. You want to have him run like a 5-yard hitch, it's easy, quick throw. And Jaden throws the outside hitches really well, but it's just a quicker, easier throw, and giving him the option of, hey, it could be a slant, it could be a hitch, it could be a quick out, it could be a tunnel screen. Like, all of that stuff becomes a lot easier from the slot in certain situations. There's also advantages to being on the outside, because also, hey, we're inside. Now we got to deal with all these linebackers and safeties. And, you know, if we outside, it's just playing one-on-one isolation basketball. So, long story short, to respond to the comment, I do think that the wide receivers they have left are capable of doing enough multiple things, have lined up in multiple places. They're good blockers, all of them. Luke, KJ, Diami especially, Ozine not quite as much. He's a little bit different of a guy. Crowder a little bit different of a guy. But those three that I think will be the top guys along with Terry, I think that those guys do enough different stuff that you can put any of them outside where Terry's spot, quote unquote, is, and then you can move him wherever you want. Again, it's not going to be a ton, but a little bit goes a long way. No weed whacking needed to be done there?
No, I think you did a solid job, Craig.
Hell yeah. All right. Other big topic of the week. One of our Take Command mailbags, we talked about Andrew Wiley versus Cornelius Lucas, because the Tennessee game, obviously the offensive line played tremendously well, and they did that with Cornelius Lucas playing at right tackle. And so we got a mailbag question of, hey, should Lucas just continue to play? And this is where I'm going to go back to what I said earlier about Diami. And I'm just going to default to Cornelius Lucas' entire career. How old do you think Cornelius Lucas is, Anthony?
29.
Here's the thing about Cornelius Lucas.
28.
You want to get one more guess in?
30.
He's 33. He's not a young player. This isn't some developmental prospect. Cornelius Lucas has been in the NFL since 2014.
Okay.
He played tackle in Detroit for 3 years. Then he was with the Rams for a year. He was in New Orleans for a year, Chicago for a year, and then Washington in 2020, and that's where he's been as kind of a swing tackle ever since. His career high game started is 12 in the 2022 season. He has been playing for 11 NFL seasons. He has played in 126 games. He has only started 53 of them. Do you really think that all of these coaches that have consistently made Cornelius Lucas a rotational player are wrong? And I like Cornelius Lucas as a third tackle. In fact, I love Cornelius Lucas as a third tackle. His ability to play right and left, very, very good. He was pretty darn good in the Tennessee game. But Andrew Wiley, albeit a mid-level starter, has been a starter for most of his career, including on Super Bowl winning teams. And I understand last year was rough, but it really wasn't as rough as it looked because the play calling had a huge impact, as we've talked about a zillion times. And so, and reputationally, it's better to be a great backup than a mediocre starter. But the reality is, the guy who's starting is better. So I get why people are like, oh, the Tennessee game. Tennessee's defense have been pretty good. Yeah, they did. They played an asinine alignment that made it so easy for Washington to run, and they did. Lucas did a solid enough job. Andrew Wiley deserves to play right tackle. He did not play bad enough to lose his job. Losing your job to injury is a thing that only happens in very specific circumstances. This is certainly not one of them. Wiley is also way more mobile than Lucas. You would lose some screen game elements. You lose some outside run elements. You lose some of your GT, your guard tackle pull plays, where Wiley has been an excellent puller this year. You lose some of that stuff if he's not available because Lucas is not as fleet of foot. So we got all kinds of comments, just simply from Tommy. Lucas, 420 Terrence. Lucas, I believe, should start this week. Sai Buddy, 4603. The O-line looked entirely different with Lucas playing. Yeah, it did. let's run it back with Andrew Wiley at right tackle, and they'd probably still score 42. That had a lot to do with the Titans, had a lot to do with Brian Robinson, a lot to do with the other 4 linemen, and Lucas played well, and I'm not saying there's a drastic difference between the two, but I do think it's funny when, like, one good game happens, or even a couple of good games, and then we assume we all know more than a guy who is in year 11, Anthony. Year 11. Oh, he should be starting now. I guarantee you, most of the people that commented would have no idea Cornelius Lucas is 33 and has been in the NFL for 11 years.
Yeah, including me. I didn't know he was in the league this long.
He's been a free agent a bunch of times. You know what no one's ever done? And I feel like I'm beating up on Big Luke now. But, like, again, he's excellent in his role. But no one has ever signed him to be a starter. Yeah. So the entire NFL is wrong?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. All right. That is Never Read the Comments. Anthony, we were a little light on comments this week, so I don't have, like, a good dessert fun comment at the end.
No. Did anyone comment on my glasses and stuff? Well, actually, I saw a funny...
Oh, there was one in the chat yesterday.
That one was actually hilarious. I told... So Zaire has a kid, and he watches every Disney movie known to man now. And he knew the movie. So I didn't know about the movie, but I had seen that character before. And I lost it.
What was the character again?
His name is Joe in the movie Soul.
Joe?
In the movie Soul.
Disney movie.
Glasses. He had a nice look. He looked like a detective, to be honest.
Soul. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Joe Gardner.
Yeah.
If you want to know what Anthony looked like when he had to wear his costume for the costume show for losing on Competition Wednesday, which you can see during yesterday's Competition Wednesday segment, which was 5:30 yesterday, and we did put that up on YouTube as well on demand because by the way, I showed that segment to Rachel this morning. She was crying at your despair at the just learning that you had lost again.
Yeah, that was
she
brutal.
did. She did like your costume though.
Thank
you. You can search. You can Google Joe Gardner, Disney Soul, and you'll see what Anthony looked like, or go watch the segment on YouTube at Craig Hoffman or at the Team 980. All right, that is Never Read the Comments. Thursdays at 5:30 here on the Team 980. 6 o'clock on Thursdays, you hear from Joe Witt Jr. and Cliff Kingsbury in a segment we call the Pick Six, biggest Commander storylines of the day. Next. Oh, yeah, Anthony. Very appropriate to play Trombone Shorty on Saints Week. In fact, I feel like you should just play nothing but Trombone Shorty the rest of the time.
Say no more.
It's Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. So let's dive into it. We only have 27 minutes left in the show because we got Virginia Tech hoops tonight, so there will be no real things where people sit in real microphones unless we go incredibly fast. And I'm already wasting time. Let's not waste any more time. Top storylines of the day, Commander style. Bang, bang. Let's do it.
The 6 biggest Commander storylines.
It is caught!
Delivered at 6 o'clock sharp. It's the Pick 6 at 6.
We set out to find a leader, someone who could take this franchise to the next level and build an elite team that consistently competes for championships.
All right, let's dive in with the top story for really on both sides of the ball. Most of what you want to hear about the defense coming up in just a minute. But let's hear from both Cliff and Joe on, the big thing. It'd help if I have the right fader up. This is...
Number 1.
That's right. Number 1. Bye week. It's over. What'd you learn? Pretty important time of year for coordinators. So, Cliff, you're up first.
Yeah, we did a bunch of self-scout. I think, looking at the lull we had, we wanted to go back and be like, hey, what did we do good? What did we do bad? What can we do better moving forward? And, consistently being able to practice and have guys healthy, I think, is a big part of it. And to be able to show the improvement we had against Tennessee when we had multiple weeks of good practices, I think that helped our mentality and what we needed to do moving forward. And coming back off the bye, being healthy, being fresh, we've really pushed it this week and are going to continue to push it. And I think that's the biggest thing is like when we practice at a high level, we play it at a high level, and we've got to become accustomed to doing that, and that's what the great teams do.
I mean, a lot of that is like kind of duh stuff. I'm sure there's some schematic stuff in the self-scout that he's obviously not going to share at the podium. But at the same time, if there was a lull in their practices when they had a lull in their play, and some of that is injuries, some of that is the timeline, short week going into Philadelphia, and some of that might have been the long week, taking too much time or whatever they did wrong in that extended break going into Dallas, that is a good thing to know, that you can't sacrifice your practices even when guys are banged up. You got to find ways to make what you're doing count with the health that you have. And so that's ultimately a good lesson for Cliff Kingsbury and this offense. On the defensive side of the ball, Joe Witt on what he learned about the team during the bye week.
That we're still a unit that's growing and trying to play the play style that we want to play. We're close, but we're not consistent enough, and I got to do a better job of getting them consistent and making sure that in winning moments that we're ready to go. We started a lot of games really well. One thing that popped out to me was I think we're third in the league in the first quarter of allowing points. We don't give up points, but in the fourth quarter, we're last in the league. We give up too many points in the fourth quarter. And so how do I shore that up? Is it the calls? Is it the situations? What is it that's allowing that to happen? And that's one area that we really looked at. We looked at the run game as well, okay? Once again, calls first, okay? Technique second, utilization of players third. And so those are areas that we really stressed. And then ball production. We have to produce the ball some one way or another. We changed some drills this week, and hopefully that we will be able to produce the ball the way that we should.
I love the process. I would have loved if Joe would have just spilled the beans on what happened. That also probably would be bad for the team because, hey, here's all the things we found. And then other teams are like, cool, thanks for telling us. Now we have all the answers to the test. But I love that. Like, one, are we calling the right stuff? Okay, if we're not, what should we have called? Okay, we are calling the right stuff in these specific situations. How did our players execute the call? Okay, these players did well, these players didn't. What does that mean for the call? What does that mean for those players? How do we fix that? Last but not least, are those even the right players in the first place? Hey, these guys didn't execute in that spot. Okay, well, maybe it's because we asked a guy to do a thing that he shouldn't have been doing. And so that all works together. That's a great way to process it. Excellent job, Joe Witt and company. Now, of course, you can have a good process and still screw up the analysis, and that wouldn't be very good. So we'll see how they do this weekend.
Number 2,
back to just the offense and the big story of what the heck do you do to try to replace your number 2 wide receiver in Noah Brown. KJ Osborne will have a part in that for Cliff Kingsbury. So how does he fit into the offense?
Yeah, I've liked him. Eval'd him when I was in Arizona and liked what I saw. I've heard tremendous things about the type of person he is. So he's a guy who can play inside, outside, and give you a lot. And so we got to see kind of how he fits in with us and try to get him up to speed. But from what I've seen on tape, he's definitely a guy that we can use.
Did a longer scouting report on KJ Osborne off the top of the show today. So if you missed that, check out the Hoffman Show podcast. Just hit play on the full show or on hour 1, and it's the first thing you'll hear. We'll also put that up on YouTube at the Team 980 and at Craig Hoffman. But Osborne's a guy that I'm not surprised Cliff likes a lot. He's not like a super special athlete. He is not like the greatest catcher of the football, the most sure-handed guy, but he plays really hard. He blocks his face off, and he can move around a bunch. And so some of that stuff is direct replacement for some parts of what Noah Brown does. Now, being a big-bodied receiver, that's going to have to fall on someone else. It's just not who KJ Osborne is. But some of their success out of certain personnel groupings in the run game and the ability to run very specific routes, I do think that KJ Osborne can be a part of that. The guy that I'm really, really curious about moving forward for this final month of the season,
number 3,
is Luke McCaffrey. I think that some of this stuff should, based off of body type and all that kind of stuff, not to mention draft status, like, hey, all right, it's December, you were a 3rd-round pick, it's time to go a little bit. I think some of that stuff should fall on Luke McCaffrey. So what's preventing Luke from having more production when, his separation numbers are good, he's playing a decent amount of snaps, and now it would hope that production is going to go up.
Yeah, I mean, he's a talented young man. We've asked him to play inside and outside because he can handle it, and that's a lot on a young player. And then we've just had, the initial addition of Noah took some of those reps away, and then other guys have stepped up, OZ and Diami, and it's a loaded receiver room that there's a bunch of guys that can do a bunch. I know they don't get the notoriety that some people talk about, but the way they play, the way they perform, it's been a good group for us. And I think that's the biggest thing is just other guys have made plays, and he's done everything we could have asked for him. But other guys have made plays, and it's just a crowded room right now.
And I think that's fair from Cliff. Like, there are times that Luke's doing what he's supposed to, but the ball goes somewhere else because someone else also did what they were supposed to. And ultimately, if they were having a bad year offensively, I think you can be like, well, why don't you get Luke McCaffrey involved more? Of course, it'd be great if Luke was having some monster season as a 3rd-round pick. Like, oh my God, rookie to rookie connection. These guys are going to be amazing for a decade. Like, we can all have those dreams. Reality is, like, OZ had some really nice games. It's been a while for him, but early in the season, he was killing it. Diami's had some really nice games. Noah's had some really nice games. Terry's having the best season of his career. And Zach Ertz has had some really nice games and is a go-to, reliable part of their offense. Eckler had a bunch of catches and takes some targets. So that's what, 6 guys? Like, if you're 7th on the target list, and then by the way, that's not even including Brian Robinson. Like, of course he's not going to have a ton of targets, a ton of catches. And so now with Brown out, yes, Osborne is in, but I do think there's opportunities for Luke to take some more reps, to move back up the depth chart. And I think that they will need that to try to round out the production they're going to miss from Noah Brown. To the defensive side in just a moment to wrap up the show and wrap up the Pick 6. But first, let's get an update on the latest in the world of women's sports presented by Wawa. Chicken, how you want it at Wawa with customizable crispy or roasted chicken sandwiches. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, and we're wrapping up because we got Virginia Tech hoops coming up at 6:30 tonight. So pregame beginning 13 minutes from now, which means we don't have much time to finish our pick six. So let us dive right back in to what Joe Witt Jr. had to say today.
Number 4.
And we'll start with Joe talking about the thing that everyone wants to know about, which is Marshon Lattimore. He is set, barring a last-minute setback, to make his debut on Sunday. So what can Marshon Lattimore open up for this defense in terms of Joe Witt's calls? And here's what Joe Witt had to say after avoiding this question for basically the last month.
We'll see. We're still taking Marshon through the process, so I am hopeful that he is ready. But until he's been totally clear, I don't know. But it depends on how much different guys can tilt the coverage one way or another. But until we get him out there, until we see, I'll be able to answer that the week after he played.
Except for he was asked again 2 questions later, and he said a little bit more.
Well, I don't know if I can pressure more than we've been pressuring because we, like I've been saying, and I don't know if people believe me or not, but we've pressured a lot. We haven't protected the corners. It'd be hard for me to pressure more than what we have. I think I looked at the numbers. I think the pressure calls, I'm around 5th or 6th in the league of the amount that we call.
So there's that. Maybe it opens up some different pressure calls. I mean, that's the thing is the pressure packages. Like I just feel like a lot of them, it's Luvu and him winning, and some of that is by design, right? It's simulated pressures and things like that where they get certain matchups or they bring extras and make sure that Luvu is going to get a one-on-one. I wonder if they maybe feel a little more comfortable bringing some corner blitzes from the other side and, dedicating some resources there, or bringing Noah out of the nickel, or safeties, whatever. I mean, that is one specifically. Like safeties, can they bring Chin and Quan more on blitzes because they don't feel like they need that help over the top? Like that is one option that potentially exists, but Joe's 100% right. Like Wagner blitzes all the time. Frankie's blitzing from everywhere all the time. And so it's hard for them to really ramp up the amount of pressure, but they are obviously going to have some different options. And what they can do behind some of that pressure, I think, instead of calling some of their zone pressure stuff, they can now just call some of their man pressures, which tend to be how defensive coordinators like to blitz. They tend to like to play man coverage behind it. But we'll see, on Sunday what they can do against a young / spotty Saints offensive line at times that has actually played pretty well the last couple of weeks. But also a young quarterback, probably in Jake Haener, who may not get the ball out quite as quick as obviously if Derek Carr is out there. As for Lattimore himself, how much did the bye week help Marshon get ready to make his debut again, which is what we're planning, or what we think is going to happen on Sunday?
Really helped. I mean, when he got here, and once I knew what was going on, I knew when we were going to get him. Okay, and so, but it's really a blessing because he's been in there with Jason Simmons and Will Gay, and they've been teaching him. And William, because he played for me, he understands how I want to see it. He understands how to communicate it to a player because he played for me for 4 years. And so that's just been really good that he's had the opportunity. So he'll be further along right now than he would be if he had played right when he got here. And nobody wants him to be hurt. Nobody. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that the benefit of it is he's further along in the defense than he would have been, that first week.
No doubt about that. I think the question is how far behind is he, or is he behind at all mentally based on if he had played the first 4 weeks? Obviously, week 1, you've only been here 1 week, but the difference in being 4 weeks of meetings versus 4 weeks of play, well, is that some kind of drop-off? We will find out. Actually, we won't find out because it's impossible to play out both scenarios, but we'll see if Marshon Lattimore looks a little lost, if there's any communication issues, anything like that when he takes the field. Again, presumably on Sunday. Continuing on with our pick 6.
Number 5.
And a guy that's played for Joe Witt Jr. for a number of years now, back in Dallas and now here in D.C., Dorrance Armstrong. He hasn't recorded a sack since week 4, but Joe says that doesn't mean he's actually playing bad ball.
Yeah, everybody look at Sacks. Sacks, he has played really solid. He's the guy that when we talking about knocking back a tight end, setting the edge, he's done that really, really well. He's been the most consistent player that we've had up front. All right, now sacks, everybody would love to have more sacks, but I've been pleased with the way DA plays because I know what I'm getting. All right, it's consistent, it's good, it's firm, and the sacks will come. I think he's at 3, and you know we got opportunities to get more.
I think something that is important is pressure rate, and his pressure rate's fine. But is it a guy who consistently doesn't convert pressure rate into sacks, which is kind of the Chase Young story on the other side for New Orleans this weekend? Obviously, we saw that here in D.C. Oh, he's got so many pressures. The sacks will come. The sacks will come. The sacks have never come. This year, he's a career high in pressure percentage. He's on 3.5 sacks. So can Dorrance Armstrong have one of these games where the numbers tend to even out, where he has a 2-3 sack performance, where they come in a bunch, where he's got a good matchup or a quarterback that's whatever, coverage is particularly good, because it all works together. And if so, you know, great. But he is playing, I think, good, consistent football. He obviously was hurt in the middle of that as well. So we'll see how Dorrance Armstrong performs on Sunday. He should be matched up a lot with Trevor Penning, the Saints right tackle, who is an interesting player. He's played much better this year. Clint Kubiak, I think, has done a good job of insulating him, which is the opposite of isolating him, and found some run stuff that works for them, found some pass pro stuff that works for him, because that dude was one of the worst right tackles in football the last couple of years, and he has really turned it around. So good for Trevor Penning, but an opportunity potentially for Dorrance Armstrong this weekend.
Number 6.
Last but not least, the run defense. You heard Joe earlier at the top of the hour, and when he talked about what he learned during the bye week, you heard him say, like, the run defense, something that we want to work on. The numbers actually aren't terrible, depending on which numbers you look at, but clearly, I don't think there's like high confidence that if we need a stop, if we're behind in a game and it's the fourth quarter, we have all 3 of our timeouts, they're going to run it 3 times. If we can stop, timeout, get the ball back to our offense and let Jaden go on a game-winning drive, can we get that stop? Joe Witt Jr., what can you do with the technique and such in the run game to help get that stop and many stops earlier in the game as well?
Well, it was a lot of aiming points, hands, making sure that we're not playing behind blocks on the second level, eye control, making sure that we're, if we're getting swap runs, all right, if we're double swaps, if they're crossing, we're sitting down in our gaps. If it's going from a 2x2 to a 3x1, all right, our gaps are changing. We understand where we're moving. We're not over adjusting and getting ourselves out of our gap when movement. So on the second level, that's been the issue, whereas over rotating, and then on the first level, aiming points and throwing hands and making sure we're knocking back.
I'm sure that's like an odd challenge for Joe because he's going to Bobby Wagner. He's like, hey, don't do too much. Or Bobby's like, I can get everyone exactly where they need to be. And so that's the hard part if you have one of these guys, and it's a unique challenge. A Bobby Wagner, a Luke Kuechly back in the day, like, Roquan's pretty freaking talented as well in that department. There just aren't a lot of guys in the league that have that level of knowledge to try to move everything around and play this chess game all the time. And sometimes if you don't get that right and you can't get it communicated in time, you get in a really bad way. So maybe sometimes, even if Bobby might know something, sticking with the call, making sure all 11 are moving together is actually the right course of action. Ultimately, the job for Joe and Bobby and everyone else is just to be more consistent on that side of the ball. I'm curious what his response is to this question, because he was asked on how to be more consistent. And then I'll give my quick 2 cents before we get out of here.
Well, it's just really when it gets to be a more consistent, it's understanding why are we calling what we're calling in certain situations. That's one. And then making sure that the communication's at an elite level, not at a good level, at an elite level. And once we're all on the same page, and when we're all, not once, but when we're all on the same page, we knock people back. The run and hit of our defense, the play style, is what I want to see, okay? All right, we run and hit people, all right? What needs to happen is when we have the opportunity to produce a turnover, I think we counted the other day, William had more, but I had it wrong. I think it was 12 where we had the ball in our hands, and we dropped 12 of them. Now, if we catch 8 of them, now we're, in the conversation of turning games around. That's part of consistency. And so, and we got to drill it and put them in the situation of, all right, flash catches. All right, defensive players do not track the ball. So we have to make them and put them in positions to where, all right, they catch the flash of the ball. All right, they're catching more tips and overthrows and such as situations like that. So we have to expose them to those situations so we can get the ball from that standpoint. And then the communication, the walkthroughs, demanding it, that it's loud, that it's sent, receive, acknowledge, and that we're all on the same page. That's where the consistency will come from.
So I'm going to be a pedantic analyst here for the final minute of the show. I actually think the Commanders' defense has been tremendously consistent. They don't need to be more consistent. They need to be better. And it's pedantic because I'm nitpicking at the verbiage here. To be more consistent, we need to do a bunch of stuff that we're not doing right now better. That's not consistently. You're consistently not doing those things, which doesn't really matter. It's just to make the point that I actually think this defense has played at a pretty consistent level week over week over week. And what has changed for them is the level of competition and the game script against teams like Tennessee and Carolina. Going back to those games, like the offense cooperated. They got up early. They played complimentary football, and they kicked the ever-living crap out of those teams. Against Dallas, the offense didn't cooperate, and those fourth quarter points hurt a lot more. Oh, darn, we lost our shutout in our 40-point win. It became 28. Doesn't really matter. Well, in Dallas, it mattered. Against Pittsburgh, it mattered because, that team was better and they performed more. Baltimore performed better because they are better. And so I think for Joe, he's 100% right on the turnovers, and that is how you get better and some of the other things they need to do. But it's not a lack of consistency. It's can they take it to one more level to close this season out? That closes our show out. See you tomorrow from Army Navy Radio Row. Coming up next, Virginia Tech Hoops here on the Team 980.